Hello, this is Callum at our Findhorn Barrow, and I'm here with
Alex Wright.
and also,
Rory O'Connell.
and today we'll be asking Rory O'Connell about music, about Findhorn, about life in general, and we're talking to you here on a beautiful May sunny day. It's been sunny the whole of May, which has been quite strange for Scotland, but we're taking it while it's here. Rory, how are you doing today?
I'm doing all right. It's beautiful in the garden. I mean, it's a little bit dry for the garden, so I'm waiting for the rain to come, maybe next week. But but actually I live in paradise up here, so surrounded by large oak trees, large trees that must be 60 to 100 years old, and rhododendrons are out, and the bluebells are just going over. I mean, it's something happening all the time, so it's amazing. In the winter it looked like a gray desert. So now it's all burst into flowers. It's fantastic.
So, to go on to the subject of Findhorn, can you tell us when you first came to the Findhorn Eco Village, and also what first led you here?
I was very disenfranchised with my college education, and I quit university halfway through. And then I just was bouncing around doing odd jobs, and not really feeling very happy, feeling usually exploited, And so I was wanting something different. So I was, sympathetic to the hippie, the alternative types that I saw, they were all real characters and very inspiring, not like suits. And then that journey just led me to wander, and then I read about Findhorn and heard about it over the media, because in the United States, where I'm from, the New York area, WBAI FM was a listener-supported radio station, and they had lots of coverage of alternative spiritual groups and such. And when they mentioned Findhorn, it was always well mentioned as one of the biggest intentional spiritual communities on the planet at the time. I think Findhorn, Oroville, and the farm in Tennessee were some of the biggest. I was interested in Buddhism, Taoism, Chinese philosophy, and as well as esoteric Christianity and Carl Jung and all Zen Buddhism, the whole kit and caboodle, none of which was taught at school. So,
sadly, yeah.
Yeah, so definitely. And when I came to visit, what happened is I left my job, the factory I was working in, traveled in a van to California, stopped off at the Esalen Institute in Big Sur, where which I had read about through various, Fritz Perls and various Gestalt books that I had read. It was an amazing place altogether. And there was, a matter of fact, in the book, William Irwin Thompson, who had visited both Findhorn and knew David Spangler, and then also went out to in his book At the Edge of History. I think he also goes out to Esalen and meets Alan Watts and various people there, and he was a great inspiration. So when I took my van out towards San Francisco, and I just decided I didn't want to stay in San Francisco, maybe I'll go back to New Jersey and become a computer programmer.
Oh yeah, that'd be a different path altogether, yeah.
Well, that would have been money. It would give me some money at any rate, because I knew there was a future in it. But I wound up on the way down going the Coast Highway and visiting Esalen, and they took me in, and I had to borrow some money from my parents, but I did a work scholar for 3 months and met all kinds of people there, and met people from Findhorn that really impressed me. Well, John Sire in particular, he wasn't pretending to be a medieval Japanese monk or a Tibetan wearing the gab. They were all dressed up. Looked like sort of dress-up spirituality to me in some ways, although that's not fair to people. I did really like the Zen Center people that I met out there. But, he impressed me a lot. And that made me think about flew to Heathrow and all that. And, and then from there I found my way up to Findhorn, did an experience week, and had an interview. I had a 2-week visa. Obviously I had no money, so they weren't all that pleased to see me at immigration, but what the heck. So, but I got in at any rate, and during that time I had an interview and they accepted me for membership. I stayed for about a year and a half. I was a little bit wild at the time. I think I had lots of strong opinions and must have been a very difficult person to get on with, really. And so I left the community, got married, the marriage broke up, and I wound up going back to New Jersey, to my parents' house. Worked there, found out about the garden school at Callum Gardens at the time, and then came back to join the Callum Garden Group, became staff.
How long was the gap there when you went back?
1979, I did Experience Week, which was a good time to come because Peter was just leaving formally, and so I got I met people from the 70s, which I've always thought was the heyday of the community, really. I always think that was when the community did what it said on the tin, really. And then, so I was lucky to get in just at the end of the 70s. I came back in 1981 and became staff at Callum, and that was still, actually, I think the 70s finally ended with the redundancies after COVID, but that's a long run. That was a long run, so that's quite interesting. Of course, the community is facing a whole new change, and nobody really knows but we don't think the 70s are coming back in a hurry. But there'll be little snatches, because I think anybody who's honest will say that they would have loved to have been there back then.
I think we could really do with a 60s or a 70s right now, the way the world's going.
They might come back, yeah. If it gets really bad. I mean, these guys in this new wave of people, right-wingers in the world, are like the complete opposite. You couldn't get something more opposite. A bit freaky, actually. But anyway, we just have to wait and see what happens.
I mean, where there's a thesis, there has to be an antithesis somewhere.
That's what they say. That's what they say.
Let's hope it's true.
They say the light always casts a shadow. That's the way it is on planet Earth, they say. So.
And going further back in your life, did you grow up in an urban environment or a more rural environment?
A suburban environment. My parents, I was born in New York City. There was an apartment. My parents were first generation immigrants from Ireland. My grandparents were both from Ireland. So my parents had been born in New York of Irish parents. So they grew up in the Depression, and my father had been sent to the Pacific in the Second World War. So they all wanted us to get education and get a proper job and all the rest of it. And they were good like that. They didn't, considering all the crazy things I did there, far less judgmental than one would imagine. They never disowned me, which is a miracle. Yeah, and I went to Catholic schools most of my life, so I had an Irish Catholic upbringing in the United States, which is different from Irish Catholic upbringing in Ireland.
And was there any culture shock at any stage, like either going from like suburban to rural, or going from America to Britain, or even going from like the East Coast to the West Coast?
I think the general Western economic view and educational view is pretty worldwide. So, even when I was in India, I visited Oroville for a while and found plenty of people I could talk to there, and it was but also saw people who were from like another planet. For me, which is really, I appreciate it. I don't want to live with just the same, people like myself all the time. That's not so much fun, really. And coming to Britain was really funny.
Oh, yeah.
Why was it funny?
Well, just images. Like I have an image of getting driven from Cluny to the park, back and forth by a guy who was French, and he was an airline pilot. And we had a book called Daphne, which was an old RAF bus, and he used to drive it like an airplane. And we would all be hanging on for dear life while he drove it over. And as we passed through the fields and such, they had all these amber lights, so nothing was very bright. It looked like a sort of 1930s or 40s movie that I had been seeing. Everything was sort of dark, and it was really, so to me it was like time traveling. I really loved it. And in fact, it was like that up until fairly recently, when all this development has happened, even in this area, which was considered an area we didn't think anybody would be interested in developing. But it has developed quite a lot. So, yeah, that's an interesting change of affairs. But I really enjoyed the culture. I also thought at that time British culture was very encompassing, very much welcomed people, and alternative types I knew, and artists and musicians were able to get the dough and do their music and survive quite well like that. In America, they didn't like that at all. They want people to be on starvation rations, and to get a job, as Frank Zappa said, be a joy, go to work. So that was a big thing. So I found it refreshing. Yeah, and and recently, of course, things change over here as well. And a lot of the changes here have been chasing American changes, which, I'm really happy to have spent 37 years over here. That I don't miss the United States much at all. I visit relatives if I have to, but I don't miss it. I like this pace of life much better.
How often do you go to America?
Not often anymore. Both my parents have passed away. So, and I went back for a wedding, which was but that was culture shock. It was in Martha's Vineyard. Somehow, some of my nephews had married into a family of big lawyers and judges in Boston, and so Martha's Vineyard is where the Democratic millionaires live, and I just found that was a bit much, and yeah. And I loved the old style cedar houses and all the rest of it, and the wooden houses and all that was really beautiful. But I asked somebody, what would that set you back? And they said, about $9 million.
Oh, whoa.
I mean, actually, I find that obscene, So, so I found that quite difficult to deal with, even though it was, like you could say it was like Disneyland, and I enjoyed seeing prawns like much bigger than my thumb and stuff like that but to tell you the truth, at the end of the day, that kind of money thing really made me feel nauseous, actually physically nauseous. And I went to escape from the wedding at one point, went towards the bathroom for the walk in the nature along in the woods and all the rest until I could clear my head, and then I came back and had a double scotch and joined in the dance.
I'm sure the scotch would have helped.
It was hard for me. I much preferred this sort of way of life, A lot of Brits didn't hear about us until quite late on, but and then late on the Americans became fewer, the Brits became greater, which was really good. And then we would get Japanese women, and we used to joke with them and say, well, Japan is a man's world, so they have no incentive. But all the women were looking for something different.
That makes sense to me. I lived over in Japan for a year when I was studying, and at that time I remember in university I had quite a few friends there who were female, who had a strong desire to emigrate.
Yeah.
But they were very attached to like the people around them and the food and like a lot of the way of life, but it was mainly because of like the grip of like patriarchy over there.
Yeah. There's one guy in the Cullerin Garden, Mishi, I think his name was, and he came in a checkered shirt. He played banjo, and he really wanted to stay. We couldn't stay for visa reasons, the way it was. But he had this story that this firm that he worked in, he got so fed up with the pecking order. You have to bow and you bow a certain way to certain people and that, but you always knew where you are in the pecking order. He said he picked up a chair and threw it through a plate glass window one time.
Well, that destroyed the pecking order there and then.
Destroyed his working prospects. But I gave him, high marks for doing it. I thought, fair
and I imagine
play.
there would have been a build-up over maybe even years to that moment.
I think so, yeah, no. And good on him for expressing it. He didn't hurt anybody except his own employment prospects, but I respected him very much for doing that. It's a shame we couldn't find a place for him. Yeah.
Speaking of banjo, so before I left this area, I used to come weekly for quite a while to the real sessions that you had. I really loved them.
In the Beastie and stuff like that, yeah.
And I've seen you play quite a lot of instruments before, so I just wanted to ask, like, what role has music had in your life, and where did all of that come from?
Well, it's a family. I don't think I got it from my family directly. Apparently, my Uncle John was born in Ireland, and he played fiddle and squeezebox, but I don't remember him playing them because he passed away when I was about 6 or 7. But there are pictures of me helping him carry stones for a dry stone wall he was building. So I must have heard something, but I don't remember it. And for me, I got interested. All my siblings, if they were interested in music, didn't really stick with it. And I think I was the only one that got a bug, and I picked up the trumpet when I was 15, which is a little bit late, at a summer music thing, and they stuck me, they just put one in my hands and said, do something with it. And of course, nothing came out when I blew it, which was quite hilarious, actually, because the guy leading the group, he kept looking at me, and then he picked up the trumpet and he played. He said, no, there's nothing wrong with the trumpet. So that was the start, very humble beginnings. But it's been I also knew that there wouldn't be a living in it, but I did it for love. I picked up instruments, taught myself, and made a noise with it. I was in the high school band for a bit, a marching band, that also used to do some sit-down music, but I didn't read music very well. I just had to learn on the hoof. But I had enough of a drive to do it, and I wasn't put off by making a dreadful noise, which I used to say is an important thing if you want to become a musician. Well, of course, the next step is learning.
Dreadful noise, learning good noise.
You have to improve on that. But so it's always been there very strongly, and luckily my son's now, of all things, starting out from being a self-taught guitarist, songwriter, and accompanist. He's been forming bands as he's traveled around the world, and usually he's the leader of the band, composing and writing the songs or the music, and making a big noise, and going from mellow to big noise, back and forth. And so he's done that, but now he's decided that he's been studying composition, classical composition, at Bristol University. So he's gone there, and he's actually doing a master's program where he has mentors that are teaching him to do like film music or backing music. So and he's also had some of his pieces performed by the Symphonia. Oof. And so I mean that's completely like almost unbelievable to come up from self-taught, musically illiterate, to learning to read music, compose music, hand out charts to an orchestra and have them enjoy playing it. That's an amazing thing to do. So he's really got it. He has a drive that I maybe didn't have, but I'm quite a chancer, I would call myself. If I like the sound of something, I'll have a go.
I mean, I'm sure he got a lot of that love of music from watching you play instruments and from seeing
possibly.
your love of music.
I think there is I recognize a certain commonality. Also, Kate's a choir teacher, and she's very gifted as a choir teacher. And again, she didn't train, but she found that she could remember all the parts in her head and not forget them. So she can teach 4 parts and go back and forth while people are singing and fix the different parts. I can't do that, that's way beyond me. But when we got up here, it was music that drew us together. I was a gardener, and I had a tin whistle, and I was learning to play the tin whistle slowly but surely, and she played the tin whistle as well as singing and all the rest of that, and we just met at a thing and somehow or other got on together. So music has always been a commonality in the family. But with Liam, I think the thing that I think I'm an ideas person. I'm technically flawed, and I recognize that. So, when you're up against people who are making a living out of music, you realize that they combine inspired ideas with technical flawlessness, or an ability to recreate things pretty, so you don't have to cringe when you listen to the playback.
I've never cringed listening to your music.
I cringe plenty.
Maybe when you start the bagpipes up.
I know that you can forgive, but when it happens in the middle of a piece, or when, because we've done lots of circle dance recordings, we got into doing that. And Kate was a big support when she came. She sang a lot of these things, and she was quite happy to sing phonetical versions of Greek stuff and Breton stuff, and so she had quite a repertoire. And so we decided to make a small group to produce live recordings for Anna Barton and the Sacred Dance people. And so in a funny way, Sacred Dance was my main musical outlet and community music over the years I've been here. I would play music outside a bit, but most of my playing was within the community, and that depended upon what I liked and what they wanted. So that was interesting.
And for you, like to like have been a part of the Findhorn community for such a time, there must have been some sort of like underlying sense of purpose or aim there that connects to like a sort of maybe even larger perspective. And I just wonder, is there something with that for you in music as well that connects to your aim and purpose in living somewhere like Findhorn?
I think we always felt it was important, and also we felt it was important that music be live and be done by those of us in the community, and I think Findhorn inspires to a certain level. I mean, the hall's quite an interesting place. I was involved with an ensemble last week with David Hammond and Nigel and Shirley and the gang, and I was really impressed. I really liked it. I liked their composition, and I was really pleased to see. I felt it was real community music that was happening, and so I was really pleased because it's hard. I mean, you can explain it sort of, but it's difficult. Like in a garden, you could draw up a game plan that delivers, food. It delivers this. It delivers that. But with community music, you can't really quantify it.
Yeah.
But there's definitely a feeling that seeing the hall full of people enjoying themselves, whether it's a ceilidh or a concert, there's something. There's a N+1 feeling about it. And also, Peter used to say something that I think Kate would agree with as well. I think she wrote an old article for One Earth magazine about community music. And I think I said something as well. It was a long time ago. But there was a sense that the hall is like a resonator, that things of a good vibe that happen in the hall then go out, radiate outwards. So we've always felt that, and it's really hard to prove that anything happens like that at all.
It's like the butterfly effect.
Yeah, and it's like, and a lot of us that have that mystical inclination believe that there are ways, the linear way that things take place is not the whole picture. I mean, there's a ripple effect, and things are interconnected. And so a lot of us believe that. So I certainly believe that. And I'm sure when I die, they'll put me straight. I had the first line of a poem cooking called, "These days I find myself playing for ghosts," because I have a feeling I play the uilleann pipes, which is a difficult thing to understand why I do, because it's a very difficult instrument to play. And you have to understand Irish music and also Irish song in Irish in order to make a fist of it, really. And I just love doing that. And somewhere I've written a poem where I chase what it's like winding the pipes up and memories of my grandfather when I was young. And I think there has definitely a connection between my fascination with things Irish. And I've gone to Connemara for the Arts Week in Clifton about 15 times. They've invited me there, and then I got on in the information caravan. But that's, so it defies logic, because logically, logic is very limited,
What do you see as Findhorn's place in the world, both when you first came here and also now, and also in the future?
It's one of those questions that when I was working for the foundation, I'm retired now, was always up. We're always reviewing what we're doing in terms of how we represent the history, the past, the work of the founders and people that really inspired us, and how we're living it in the moment and what our plans are and how that affects Findhorn going forward. I would say we're at a real crossroads as a community these days. I got interested in the idea of the mythogenic zone around Findhorn, that there's the ideas persist. How they persist in the world would interest me, because at one point it was quite clear what our influence was, and our literature and visiting programs and all the rest of that all reflected that. But most of that's been put on hold, and I don't think they'll be recreated in the same way. I don't think that's possible, because the horses left the field, so to speak. You can't really. But I think there'll be attempts. It looks to me, just from where I'm sitting, because I am an ideas person and I like to play with ideas. It looks to me like the most fertile idea is the eco-village. And I think if it just becomes an old person's retirement home, it's not very interesting, because without young people coming, I was in my 20s when I came. So most of the people in the community, when it was at its most vibrant, were in their 20s. And most of them were broke. So I think in order for that to be inspiring to me again, we'd have to have a way for young people who are broke to come to a place, feel there's lots of projects to get involved with, work with, and develop, and maybe a place where they could stay for a certain period of time, even if it's not forever, just a reasonable period of time. I think that would be great. And so I think I have a funny feeling that if some of the projects in the eco-village development, and there are going to have to be building, and some land-based, food-based, and nature-based projects are on the or in people's minds. So I think if these things go ahead, that could be a way to support young people in coming. Yeah, so I get a good vibe every once in a while. Sometimes, if I look at all the logical things that we've built up and that have disappeared, and all, it can be quite depressing. And depression isn't much fun. So so you try to think something new has got to happen. So I think being really open-minded is important, and seeing what will happen. And I sort of don't think we can curl back into the womb. We can't go back into the past. Although I think for me, the reason I started performing was I only did it for therapy. I would play music for my own therapy. I just felt better doing it and felt good exploring musical ideas. But Eileen stopped me. Eileen was a very funny character. She had a habit of, when she felt an impulse, she would stop people and say something to them, then carry on. Sort of like drop the bomb, and then carry on. So she stopped me once and said that she had heard that I play, because I was a gardener at the time. That's how I defined myself. And she said, she said, I've heard that you play the piano or that you sing or something like that. She said, when are we going to hear you at a sharing? And I said, I just do it for therapy. I don't perform it. But then when she left, I had a feeling that it was sort of false humility, that oh no, and so I started to take steps towards performing, even if it was a total disaster, and sort of laughing the disaster off and carrying on anyway. But that was the main impulse. Eileen gave me advice about three or four times, but I always took it on board each time. And even though I may not have wanted to do it at the time, it was all very interesting, and taking it on board had a big change effect on my life, really. So, yeah, as a performer, I wouldn't have been doing it if she hadn't needled me.
I've often found that the best advice I've had has been advice I absolutely hated when I first heard and got mad at the person for sometimes even.
Well, that's how they used to say it's a good litmus test as how true, how spot on it is by how angry you get afterwards. I think that's...
And there was also a sentence you said there that really stood out to me. Laugh in the disaster and carry on anyway.
Yeah.
Because I think if one does that, then one is eventually playing the music. But if one doesn't do that, then you just stop at some point.
Well, I wish some of the disasters never happened, but I've had some really classic disasters where instruments came apart in the middle of a performance with a hall full of people watching. And I certainly wish that didn't happen. But since it did happen, I apologized to my friends who were performing with me, and they all said, oh, no worries. They said, it was fine. We covered for you. And the love, and that's quite a learning. I learned that, yes, a mistake happened. I wish I had the nous to fix it in the moment. I fixed it later. But it just happened, and my friends were weren't disappointed or put off, or no disaster happened out of it. And I thought maybe the real lesson is just to relax and realize that I'm surrounded by people who love me. It's more of a heartwarming experience than a disaster. Yeah. One time a pin came out of my pipes while I was playing solo in the hall And if you're in a keyed instrument and the pin comes out, you're screwed. You're Donald Ducked, really. So, I didn't know what had gone wrong. It just, the thing just, it wasn't playing. And I got so angry at one point, I said, either I'm going to have to stop, or I just got angry and improvised for a bit, and then just bowed and went off. And this one woman came up to me later, Priyanka, who's an interesting person and a musician herself, and she said that was the most amazing thing she'd ever heard in her life.
Well, I guess that's kind of like the penicillin thing, Sometimes you can get happy accidents.
I thought that was really amazing. I thought that was wonderful. I didn't correct her and tell her what had gone wrong. I said, I just,
Community is really like at the heart of a lot of music, and it seems that your journey through music, that's been the case. I'm curious to know, when you're playing music with people, when you're jamming with people, what do you see as like the shared rhythm there between people? As in, like, how far do you think it goes of the actual connection between people when that happens? Because I've heard some people describe it, like, I don't play instruments myself, but I've heard some people describe it can almost be like a sort of like merging of consciousness in some kind of flow state.
Unless the music is very ego driven, which sometimes it is, but I tend not to play that kind of music. My motivation is the person. Usually I respond to people asking me, and my motivation is because I like the person who's asked me, and I'll go the extra mile to do something out of my comfort zone to work with the project. And I find that's how I want to live my life, really. And I often used to jokingly say, well, when I die, I don't think I'll remember all the tunes I played, but I'll remember the people I played with. And I think that's important. A lot of musicians will say that. I was also very influenced by jazz music at one point, and I had the great luck to play with Philip Stewart for a while. But music that's improvised, you have to be you have to listen and be really present and aware to a very large degree. You have to be aware of the structure of the music and what's happening outside of it, but you also have to be willing to step up to the plate and pull something out of yourself that's different and makes a statement. And you don't really know how it's going to go until it happens. Usually with an improvisation, I have an initial idea. And I trust now that once I've got the initial idea out, other things will follow. And it'll tell a story, because what you want to do is tell a story. And you want the story to match. It's really challenging to do that with songwriters, because they have an idea, vision for their song, usually when they write it. I want to complement that, but I have to do my own thing. And that's, it doesn't always work all the time. But, I love it when it does. Yeah, I really enjoyed playing with David last week. It was really nice to play. I really enjoyed that a lot.
Is there anything else you'd like to add or to speak about now that we're going to close the podcast?
I think I would just like to encourage people in community to pick up music and to take it as far as they can. I continued to work in work departments. It was very difficult to make the time to come to grips with what's involved with playing music to any kind of standard. Barbara Satina came in the community around a similar time, and she had to leave because she was working in the kitchen. But with what she was doing musically, she just didn't have enough time, and there was no way to take time in working hours. It all had to happen outside. So her music took off when she stepped out of the kitchen. But I like to think that, when I think about it, a lot of the people I play with, most of the people I play with are outside the community. But I really value the people in the community that I play music with a tremendous amount. And I can see it as generations, but I really would love people to see that as a vocation, to play music from within the community and try to play music that represents the community at the time. And that will change. It should change over time as generations and what inspiration changes. And I mean, Peter Caddy believed that, and Eileen believed that the hall, that the performing arts had to be central to the life of the community, and that goes back to their ideas about Saint-Germain and the enlightened masters and that sort of a thing. But I think it's a good thing, no matter how you look at it. I thought that was visionary. And the hall's a ridiculously beautiful, expensive, big place to put on a sandy caravan park in the north of Scotland, and it'll never make sense. But it's a tremendous blessing. So, I think it's a wonderful thing to explore.
Thanks very much, Rory. I really enjoyed that.
Well, thank you very
you.
much. It's always nice chatting with you.